and Heights. The winner, of course, in November will take office almost immediately because the seat is currently vacant with former council member Costa Constantinides stepping down. Now, the three candidates vying for the seat are Tiffany Caban, who won the Democratic primary in June. We've got Felicia Kalan, who's running as a Republican, and Edwin DeJesus, who's affiliated with the Green Party. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much, guys, for joining us tonight. I know you're very busy, and so, you know, the community and we, the Queen's Post, are very thankful for you to join us tonight. So in any event, first of all, we're going to kick the ball off by, you know, giving everyone 2 minutes to speak, to introduce yourselves, you know, to say why you're running and why you are the best person to represent the 22nd Council District. We're then going to have a series of questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer those questions. So to introduce or to get the ball rolling, Tiffany, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? For those that don't know, I'm sure many do, of course, but and why you're running and, you know, why you think you're the best person to represent the district.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for hosting this. Hey, y'all. My name is Tiffany Caban, public defender, organizer, activist. I'm a queer Latina raised by an elevator mechanic and a domestic worker. And I love this community. And I came to this work not because I saw injustice or inequity and wanted to help, but because I lived it. You know, it's tied to my survival and that of my friends and my family. I'm from a family that grew up in public housing, had exposure to violence, mental health issues, substance use, and economic insecurity. And it drives the work that I did as a public defender, and it drives the work that I do today. You know, a friend told me, everyone says it takes a village to raise a child, but who is uplifting and supporting the village? And that's the job of government, right? And I'm running because I know that local doesn't mean small. So yes, I'm going to fill the potholes, trim the trees, pick up the trash, but I'm running to be a legislator and set a budget in the largest, most powerful city government in our country. And we've got some work to do, right? You know, we're facing multiple crises, the pandemic and economic crisis, the climate crisis, a crisis around policing and racial justice. But the literal definition of a crisis is a turning point. And we have an opportunity for solutions scaled to the size of the problems that we're facing. And so I'll fight for our neighborhood small businesses and working families, champion green initiatives to fight that climate crisis, create good green union jobs, a just budget, right? One that fully funds the things that keep us safe and healthy, housing, healthcare, education. And I'm not just campaigning on ideas. We're living our values and doing the work right now. Our campaign went door to door, helping neighbors affected by Ida and working with our small businesses to connect folks with services. We've organized with directly impacted folks and elected officials to decarcerate and create safer conditions on Rikers, and are working with violence interruption groups to address the root causes of violence in our community. And I've testified against the proposed polluting energy peaker plant, worked with federal electeds to guarantee Green New Deal infrastructure funding. This is my home, and I want to build the safest, healthiest communities possible together. And I'm ready to do it on day one, so I hope to have y'all support. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. Felicia, go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you again to Queen's Post, Christian, for organizing this forum. My name is Felicia Kalan. I'm a mom of two running for this seat because City Hall has never been more out of touch with everyday working families like mine. Every day it gets harder to raise a family, to start or run a business, or just to walk safely down the streets or in our subways. Our safety is on the ballot, our small businesses are on the ballot, and the future and well-being of our children is on the ballot. We need more than just a city council person. We need a uniter, someone who understands the difficulty of raising two kids in the city. I know tough times. I know what it takes to build something from nothing. I grew up in a struggling single mom household. I've worked since the age of 15. I put myself through college. I was a youth director of a Presbyterian church, a legislative aide, co-founded a national nonprofit called Unchained, working with survivors of human trafficking. And I was the VP of a company called Cohatch. I'm a hard worker, I'm an innovator, I'm a mom, and I will work tirelessly for you and your family. But without safety, we have nothing to build on as a community. And I will fight to keep our neighborhoods safe and clean, working with the NYPD. I'm not running on a Republican, Democrat, or socialist agenda. I'm here to be a facilitator for our community. to help create more opportunities for our children. I wouldn't be sitting here today without access to good quality education. And over 51% of our city budget goes to fund education. We need a parent at the table, especially after all that parents have gone through. And I'm the only parent in this race. I know that when we create pathways for quality education and economic opportunities while supporting families, we'll address many of the root causes of the problems plaguing our city. And I'd be honored to be your city councilwoman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Felicia. And Edwin, over to you.
Hey everyone, my name's Edwin DeJesus. I'm a lifelong resident of Astoria, Queens, the only candidate who actually grew up in Astoria. I attended PS2, 141, and the Academy for Careers in Television and Film, all public schools within the district. I graduated from Columbia University on a full scholarship where I studied film, and I've done some film gig work in the film and TV industry here in New York City. I decided to run for New York City Council in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic because I've seen a lot of change over the years. I've seen a lot of local mom and pop shops go out of business due to the greed of large corporations like Amazon. And that's just it. Our city is being taken over by a ruling class of oligarchs that stopped caring about us a long time ago. They're the ones in control. They're the ones who operate behind the scenes and buy out our politicians. And they're the ones who are misinforming us through the mainstream media so that we can be too busy hating each other and angry at each other so that we're distracted while they divide and conquer us and they keep all the money for themselves. Wealth and income inequality is at an all-time high right now. And the reason for that, the source of our suffering, is the two-party system. That's why I'm running as an independent Green candidate to take this movement outside of the two-party duopoly. Why would we vote for the same old Democrat and Republican politicians? They're two sides of the same coin. They're the ones who put us in this mess, and I'm going to get us out. We need somebody who's new and young and fresh with bold ideas, who's going to fight for the most vulnerable seniors, disabled community, veterans, students, and low-income residents. I am not here to climb the political career ladder. I am here to fight for material change for the working class. Vote your conscience this November. The spoiler effect is a myth. If you vote for a third-party candidate now, we'll create a wave across the country of third-party candidates being inspired to run. And that's how we're going to take our country back. That's how we're going to take our freedoms back, because this is the greatest city in the world. And right now, we are going to lose everything unless we stand up right now. So I hope that you can vote for me, Edwin DeJesus. Not a Democrat, not a Republican, a New Yorker for city council. Thank you.
Great, Edwin, great. So listen, I'm going to be asking a series of questions and I'm going to sort of move it around as to who answers first, etc. Given the fact that we're the Astoria Post, we're going to ask a number of questions that are very germane to Astoria. We're going to ask questions that are obviously citywide questions, but some that are, particularly targeted towards Astoria. And the first question I'm going to ask is particularly targeted to Astoria. And Edwin, you're going to be the first one to answer that question. Now, there is a large development plan in the works for a mixed-use building where the Neptune Diner is, where Staples is, and another property on 31st Street. Now, the plan is for 278 units, 67 deemed affordable. Now, the next council member, which is obviously going to be one of you, is going to decide the fate of this project, since it'll go before the city council. Now, what's your view on it, and how would you vote for it?
Yeah, so I would vote against this project because it's going to accelerate gentrification in our neighborhood. It's going to raise the property value, and it's going to displace locals like myself by increasing rent and food prices. We don't want Astoria to become the next Williamsburg. We want to keep the price of a bacon, egg, and cheese at $3.50 a roll so that we don't displace the locals like myself. If you look around Astoria, all of these large corporations have been destroying the culture. This is the most ethnically diverse neighborhood across the country, and the culture is quickly becoming homogenized. That's why I'm going to fight to redesign the Euler process, because in my opinion, it was designed to be circumvented by the big real estate developers who buy out the politicians with illegal bribe money. And I'm the only one who is promising to draft legislation to permanently respect member deference so that a council member from another district can't step on our toes and say, no, we're going to greenlight this project where Neptune Diner is. Not on my watch. And I know that Tiffany Caban has agreed to eliminate member deference when she signed the Courage to Change Pact. I'm going to make sure that Astoria stays the way that it is and that we don't allow it to become again, overrun by large corporations and the greed of these big companies and big real estate developers.
All right. Now, Tiffany, I'll let you respond to that when you answer. But Felicia, you're the second person to respond to this question. And again, it's dealing with the rezoning application where the Neptune Diner and Staples are located.
Yes, so like many historians, I'm concerned about the overdevelopment of the neighborhood. I'm a person that values maintaining the history and character of our area. Realistically, I also know that we have a need for senior housing and we have a need for affordable housing. So I want to speak specifically to this project. I'm a person that values the community board input. And the community board voted against this particular project by a vote of 25-4. So I would keep that into consideration when making a final determination on this. But as it stands, I would not be in favor of the project. And I think a huge shortfall of this project in particular is that they didn't really engage the people in the area surrounding the development. I think we can improve that system, whether that be sending out a text to people or a mailer to let people know that, hey, a bike lane's coming or a new development is coming. People are outside of the process. And oftentimes when a development happens, it's the first step to people getting involved in the political process. It's the first time they go to a community board. It's the first, time they try to reach out to someone who's an elected official so they can understand this cumbersome process. We need to find ways to get people involved. Perhaps this project would be more favorable to the surrounding people who live in the neighborhood if they had a say in what the future of that development would look like and how it would benefit the community. So again, I'll go back to, I would vote, really heavily on how did the community board vote on this? They voted it down. So I would, stick with supporting that vote.
All right, great. Now, Tiffany, your response again, we're talking about the Neptune Diner and Staples and what you would do should you be the next council person.
Yeah, I just had breakfast at the Neptune Diner this morning. Just to zoom out a little bit, because I think that the context is incredibly important, right? Like we have to, yes, be focused on these very local projects, but also within the context of these citywide systems. ULURP is outdated, right? It's purely reactive. It's heavily weighted towards developer interest, and it needs to be reformed. We talk about being able to better engage and give more power to our community boards. Part of that is reforming the system so that we don't have a system where developers come in with their ideas, which are rooted entirely in profit margins, right? Present them to our community. And then by that point, the ball is rolling and we're fighting over little concessions. We're taking on projects that increase gentrification, that destabilize our communities in the long term, but have been convinced that we need to take these crumbs. So we need to have a land use process that is working class led, that it's focused on racial and environmental justice, right? That it's not contributing to our climate crisis. And a comprehensive planning process is going to be, a big part of that. I think that approvals of individual rezoning applications should first and foremost consider whether or not the application furthers both the city's and the community's visions, right? And provides what we need. And we have a housing crisis. And so the biggest problem with this project is that it's not affordable housing, right? We're talking about 67 of, the 200 plus units being affordable. That's not good enough. And it's actually still not affordable. So when we talk about addressing the housing crisis, we have over 800 families in our shelters here in our district, right? That are experiencing housing instability. We have to create ultra affordable housing to house the folks who are struggling. And we know that using the AMIs isn't good, right? Affordable under this project is something like $64,000 for a four-person family. There are lots of folks that is not affordable for. And when it comes to member deference, I believe in deference to the people, right? And specifically to working class and low-income folks in our community. And that's who I'm consistently going to vote for and with and listen to. Because one thing that history shows us is that when you provide solutions for the most vulnerable folks, it benefits everybody across the spectrum. And it's a joke to think that a project in one district won't affect another district across the city. And so that's really important too, not just for projects here in our neighborhood, but projects across the city as well. We need to develop. And we need to do it union-led, but we've got to make sure that we're meeting our housing needs.
Eliminating member deference will increase gentrification.
Excuse me, Edwin. Let's just move on to the next topic, please. Okay, this question is for you, Felicia. Affordable housing obviously is a big issue. You know, Tiffany was just talking about the rental component, but for a lot of senior citizens, property taxes are a big issue. Do you think that the formula for determining property taxes is an equal one and a fair one? And do you think that the property tax system needs to be reformed?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, I'm a mom with 2 children, and even with good paying jobs, we've had to get odd jobs just to make ends meet. So I am very aware how expensive it is to raise a family here. And property taxes here in the district, we have a lot of seniors on fixed incomes. And every time we raise property taxes, which is, by the way, a majority of where our city budget comes from, it really negatively impacts those individuals. So absolutely, I think something that we need to really take into consideration is that 20, 30 years ago, when people bought their homes, you know, they bought it for a very low amount. And today they're paying taxes on the price of what they would sell their home for. But this is leading to displacement because some people get to the place where they can't afford their property taxes. That's why we're seeing, you know, a lot of the small landlords who, you know, have to increase the rate of rent. How can we, you know, talk about affordability if we are not talking about property taxes? So yes, I do think there are ways that we can mitigate that. You know, perhaps it's when you sell your home, you know, that's when you're paying more of the taxes. But absolutely, I think it's a huge problem here in the city. There's a lot of seniors that live on fixed incomes that are also homeowners. You know, my neighbor is a great example of that as well. Every year her property taxes go up, and this year the taxes went up and the value went down. So that's a huge problem, and it's something that we certainly need to address. And I'll also just say senior housing in general is a huge need here in the community. I've had, just because I'm on 23rd Avenue, so many seniors who've come to my office just to help navigate, you know, city services or trying to find housing. And it's something I'll make a high priority. And yes, we have to get the cost of living down.
Okay, thanks. Tiffany, over to you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important just to note that, generally speaking, right, that this is a state-led issue. And so understanding the relationship between every level of government and how even as, you know, a municipal government elected official, being able to navigate those systems and work and advocate with and alongside folks at every level of government, which is something I've done quite a bit at the federal, state, and then local level as an organizer. But we need to help with the fight to tax the rich, right? To take the burden off of folks, right? Working class folks here. But beyond that, you know, thinking about even just affordability in general, you're taking into account property taxes, but like we're also in this moment where 2/3 of, we have a deeper problem here as well. 2/3 of our private housing stock is being bought up, not by families trying to you know, gain some generational wealth. And it's hard for them to compete to even buy these homes because private equity firms and real estate developers are buying up our single family homes. And so we have these conversations even about that end up pitting, you know, landlords and tenants against each other when really there is a common problem, an enemy just a layer above, and like taking again that really holistic approach and looking at the system as a whole to be able to get to the root and effectively target it to get some good solutions. So we need to put the pressure on at the state level. We need to make sure that we are reducing gentrification, that we are, you know, limiting the ability for these equity firms to come in and buy homes and creating more opportunities for working class folks. And part of that also is like good jobs, raising wages, worker protections, you know, really looking at every single agency and layer of government to support families and ease some of that burden.
Okay, great. Edwin, what are your thoughts on you know, the property tax system, and you know, how do you think it might need to be reformed?
Yeah, well, we need to cut taxes for the working class. There's no reason that a couple dozen billionaires were able to amass $1 trillion in wealth during this pandemic at the exploitation of workers and putting profit over people. I don't agree with the slogan tax the rich because it's not specific enough. There are a few dozen ultra wealthy individuals who are consolidating all of the wealth into their hands. Again, Amazon pays $0 in taxes. We need to be targeting these specific large corporations that operate in New York City, and we need to get our taxpayer money back from them and giving it to the hands of the New Yorkers. That's why I propose direct stimulus payments, and I'm also a fan of rent stabilization for small businesses so that when their lease is up after a certain amount of years, it can only be increased by a set amount so that they don't get priced out and the property value increases. But we need to be subsidizing the homeowners as well. And like I said, we can do that by by making sure that these few dozen ultra wealthy individuals pay their fair share in taxes. And I agree with Tiffany that we need to stop gentrification. And we could definitely do that by not eliminating member deference, which she's suggesting that we do. And again, I totally welcome newcomers to the neighborhood. That's fine. Just don't come here and try to take power after losing a DA race in 2019 because you don't actually fight for the interests of the community. When you're doing that, you're just using the office of city council as a stepping stone to climb the political career ladder.
Tiffany, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I'm really proud of the work that I do. I have always said to myself, you go where the work is and you try to help your communities. I did that as a public defender. I am proud, really proud of my run for district attorney and the work that we did, the organizing we did outside of that, because we saw that even when you fall short, you can have some really big, important impacts in our community. For example, in our campaign, a group came to be called Bangladeshis for Kaban. They turned into BOP, Bangladeshi Americans for Political Progress. We created opportunities to build power in our communities. A Bangladeshi community that didn't feel seen and heard now runs an organization after my race. They ran a slate of local, hyper-local candidates for elected office, district leaders, won some of those. They just ran a slate for city council. Now we're ushering in the first South Asian representatives our city has ever seen. I'm deeply proud of that work. And after that race, I said, you have to keep helping the community. Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. So, look, actually, the next question is for you. To start, the next round of questions is for you, Tiffany, the first one. Do you think the mayor's recent decision to phase out the Gifted and Talented program from city schools was the right one?
I do. And I say that as a G&T kid. I was in the Gifted and Talented program when I was a kid. We have the most segregated school system in the country. We have really encouraged this scarcity mentality where parents and students are fighting over limited resources, when the fact is that we have an almost $90 billion budget, right? And we need to be pumping more of it into our schools so that every single child has the opportunity to learn and thrive, no matter their ability, no matter the manner in which they learn, and that we're providing all kinds of learning experiences. Coming through and out of the pandemic, it's going to be that much more important that we are really focused on social emotional learning, that we are incorporating more restorative justice programs into our school, and that we are being able to fund in a manner where we are allowing for a holistic learning environment for each and every one of our children. Every single school should be able to serve every single child in their neighborhood.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Edwin, what are your thoughts on the mayor's decision to phase out Gifted and Talented programs?
Yep, I think it was a huge mistake. I think we should have expanded the Gifted and Talented programs. It shouldn't have been all or nothing. We should be giving more opportunities to our students, especially given the fact that it is true that some have more talents than others, and we need to take that into consideration. I went to a career and technical education high school that specialized in filmmaking. This is a public school, has one of the best programs in the country. We need to be expanding that program so that students can be learning high-skilled trades like filmmaking, like culinary arts and construction. And so that when they get out of high school, they don't have to go into thousands of dollars in debt to get a college degree. And if they do, it should be affordable. But if they don't, they should be given the resources and job training and job database programs so that they can actually get a high-skilled job in these sort of realms. And so I don't think that the getting rid of G&T was a good idea. I believe that we need to expand our opportunities for our children, not get rid of them.
All right, thanks, Edwin. Felicia, what are your thoughts on the Gifted and Talented program?
So I am against eliminating the gifted and talented programs. I believe we should be expanding those programs. I have 2 kids in public schools. Zayden is a first grader, Zaria is a kindergartner. And, we should be expanding opportunities for children. And I think this just goes to show why the mayor should not have full control over our education system. We need a school board, whether it be regarding gifted and talented programs or other decisions. We need parents at the table, and it's not good enough that the mayor can just, decree a proclamation before he leaves that the gifted and talented program be eliminated. Parents have gone through so much over the last few years. I had make or break moments myself becoming an educator at home, and we should be giving kids every opportunity to succeed, not taking more opportunities away. I also just want to speak to the fact that Queens is the borough with the most overcrowded schools. We've had schools eliminated. We need to be building more seats. We need to be investing in our children. We need to get our class sizes down. And again, the mayor should not have full control where he or she can make a decision. And we need to have more participation by parents. So I would be for the Gifted and Talented program. And my kids are not in that program. I actually didn't even have Zaria take the test because we love our school. But I don't want to take away opportunities from other children.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question starts with you, Edwin. Something you've spoken about before, but I'm going to run the question by you. Transportation is a big issue in Western Queens, and bicycle lanes is a hot button issue. Do you think that the protected bicycle lanes on Crescent Street are working? And what locations would you advocate for in terms of protected bicycle lanes in the 22nd Council District?
Yeah, so let me start by saying this. I am a biker. That is my primary means of transportation. And I did write an op-ed that was only criticizing specifically the Crescent Street bike lane because it is dangerous and it is not currently protected. It's a 2-way bike lane on a dangerous street, and it's blocking accessibility to the Mount Sinai Hospital entrance. And that's not just me saying that. That's residents who live on Crescent Street who are saying that. I want to expand our bike lane program. I want to expand biking in general, but we have to be smart about where we place these bike lanes so that pedestrians, motorists, and cyclists are protected alike. And I've also said that I believe it is important for the seniors and disabled community who do rely on their vehicles to have the option, if they want, to have some sort of street parking and it not be blocked off by the city bikes in the street, and perhaps putting them on the sidewalk so that you don't have cars idling looking for parking all day and creating more emissions, which is against the green objective. Okay, there are a lot of people, Queens is an immigrant community, who cannot afford a driveway to park their car overnight to get to work in the morning. Not everyone can afford a private driveway like the one that Tiffany Caban has. Tiffany Caban does have a private driveway. I don't own a car. I like to use the bike. And so again, I am very much about alternative means of transportation, electric cars, electrifying our bus fleet in particular, and expanding our New York City ferry service, and funding our broken MTA infrastructure and subsidizing those Metro cards for those who cannot afford them.
All right. Felicia, the question is for you. Your thoughts on the Crescent Street protected bicycle lanes, and perhaps other streets that you'd like to see protected bicycle lanes on in the Astoria area?
Well, I think transportation is a great example of how out of touch city government is. With the bike lane on Crescent Street, that actually goes right, it takes out the parking right in front of an emergency room with Mount Sinai. And I can't think of a single person I know that is for the bike lane on Crescent. So no, I'm against that bike lane. I think we should be really engaging the community with what the community wants, whether that's, we're seeing parking eliminated with the city bike docking stations, taking out parking when those could easily go on some larger sidewalks. We have to start making reasonable accommodations, and we can't continue to eliminate parking, especially because we have so many transportation deserts. That being said, we need to improve our bus service. We need to improve our subway infrastructure, and, again, make accommodations for everyone. But I would not be for a protected bike lane on Crescent Street.
Okay, thank you. And Tiffany, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's critical that we expand our bike lane infrastructure as well as our public transportation infrastructure. Again, the most existential crisis we are facing is the climate crisis, and we will not come out of it. We will not have a world to hand off to our children or our children's children if we don't change the way that we live right now. And the government's job is to create the infrastructure so that those changes are incentivized, so that they're embraced, so that they're easy for our neighbors to take advantage of and incorporate into their everyday lives. That's the challenge, and that's the work of City Council, the mayor, our state and federal legislature. So for example, Crescent Street bike lane, it's got to be better protected. I was out there with folks who were calling for quick curbs and, different more safer barriers before somebody was killed on that bike lane, unfortunately. The other thing is that the planning around where they're placed, really reactionary, not strategic enough. Too often, not just here, but around the city, we'll get a bike lane put in after somebody dies, rather than being proactive and looking at sort of the connectivity and where it makes sense to do these bike lanes, taking into account emergency vehicle routes, taking into account our disability community and our elderly community. So I want to make sure that we're expanding those things and providing good access to it. I don't think it's a good answer to say, it's a transit desert, therefore we can't do this. The work should really be getting to the root and say, we have a transit desert, we need to address that. Let's make sure that we do the bike lanes, that we electrify our bus street, that we improve our train service, that we make it easier for folks to get around, that we create 15-minute neighborhoods so that you don't have to leave your neighborhood if you don't want to get to a doctor, to get to your school, to get to anything that you need to get to. It's local and it's citywide.
Okay, Tiffany, thanks.
Thank you.
Next question is for Felicia, and it deals with public safety. There's been an increase in violent crime in the 114th precinct. And, many of these violent crimes have taken place on NYCHA properties and have been gang related. What would your solution be to try and combat this, to try and get on top of it?
Well, I think public safety is the single most important issue in this race. It's certainly the single most important issue to myself, our family, and a lot of the residents in District 22. We pay a $98 billion budget. It will be $98 billion next year. And I think public safety is a very basic city service. So first of all, we cannot be defunding the police. That is not the answer to the crime that is happening in our neighborhood. Transit crime is up in the 114 precinct. Robbery is up 15%. Murder is up 28%. Again, this is all right here in our backyard. We have to fight for public safety. At the same time, we should be investing in crime prevention. I think the best way we can do that is through investing in education and economic opportunities for people. So again, just to really talk about what we should be doing for public safety. We need to fund the NYPD. We need a city council person that will work with the NYPD. We need to restore and reform the anti-crime unit as in Eric Adams' plan. We have to have police working and interacting with the community more. We need a lot of, focus on public safety here in the community. And I don't support my opponent's plan to completely abolish the NYPD. I really can't wrap my mind around it, to be honest. When Ms. Caban said there's no connection between police and public safety, I disagree with that statement. I think that there absolutely is a huge connection between police presence and a deterrent of crime. So I'll be the candidate that will fight to make sure that our neighborhood is safe. And I think we need to really work with our vulnerable youth population, age 14 to 18, make sure that they have after-school sports and activities, make sure that we're investing in internship and apprenticeship programs, making sure that we're, again, investing in crime prevention, investing in our most vulnerable communities. But we also have to address the rising crime, and we cannot do that by defunding and abolishing the police.
Okay. Thank you, Felicia. Tiffany, makes sense actually for you to be second, given what Felicia just said. So what are your thoughts?
Great. And so I'd like to respond and then respond to Ms. Kalan as well. Yeah. So I've spent my entire professional career focused on public safety, focused on working within the criminal legal system, on studying violence, crime, policing, prosecution, and incarceration, not just here, but around the country. And I am deeply concerned with public safety. And public safety is really tied to public health. And it's also personal. My earliest memory as a child, my parents grew up in the Woodside houses. My grandmother stayed there until she passed away. My earliest memory was my mom pulling me behind a car on 31st Ave, right next to the Woodside houses because of gunfire. This is personal to me. Nobody who is directly impacted wants safer communities like more, right? And then because of what we experience. I want to invest in the things that work. Okay, because we have the largest, most funded police force in the country. And police, only 2 to 3% of what they do is what you think that they do. 97% has nothing to do with it. 2 to 3% of their time is spent responding to violent crime, not interrupting, not preventing, responding to. And then even by their own statistics, their clearance rates or their rates of accountability of catching people, less than 40%. Why we pump more money into a police force that is proven to disproportionately brutalize Black and brown folks and also not get good public safety results is beyond me. So what I want to do is make sure that we are using our money wisely and taking evidence-based approaches like expanding CMS and cure violence models, knowing that when you fully fund and scale them in communities, gun violence goes down by upwards of 70%. These things exist, and we can be expanding them here. We just got approval to get expanded in Astoria houses as well as Woodside houses, and I think that's going to be great. Holistic approaches. Did you know that housing repairs reduce crime? In Philadelphia, they gave housing grants to small homeowners to fix their homes. Within a month, crime went down by 25%. Not just dilapidated, not having safe, good repair homes contributes to public safety issues. Jobs, the number one thing. Access to mental health care. It's not okay that Rikers Island is the number one mental health care provider in our state, right? So making sure that we are going to the root causers of crime to prevent it before it happens, and then actually instituting some accountability so that we're changing behavior when people hurt other people. I am here to get the best public health and public safety outcomes, period. And these things are empirically proven to work, and they exist. They exist here, and it's a matter of making sure we all have access to them to get better results than we're getting now. And I just want to push back a little bit on some of the fear mongering because, and listen, violence is up because we are also experiencing an economic crisis. People, deprivation breeds desperation. And any act of violence is one act too many. But I do want to remind folks that we are experiencing historic lows in violence, and we know what works. So while it's ticking up, we should be going back to the models that helped us tick it back down. And that was things like cure violence. That was things like access to more mental health. We have defunded our hospitals. Queens, in the past 20 years, we've lost 20 hospitals. Hospital I was born in doesn't exist anymore. All of those things is where we should be spending our very big budget, but it's still finite, to get better returns on our investments.
All right, thanks, Tiffany. Edwin, over to you.
Yes, I think we need to be investing in preventative measures and funding community leaders on the ground. For example, my friend David Rosasco, who takes the youth around Woodside to do tree mulching and street cleanups. This gives our youth a sense of community and a sense of purpose so that they don't go down the wrong path of perhaps gang and gun violence, which is on the rise. And if you look at what they're doing in Brownsville right now, they established a gun buyback program, which provides financial incentives to give in your weapons. And it has been so far incredibly successful, and we can expand that program across the city. Where I disagree with Caban on her accountability platform, for example, is that the responsibility has to be on the victim to solve the problem and create an accountability plan with their abuser. I think that neglects the fact that that victim might have experienced PTSD or trauma and kind of disregards that experience that they went through. I also believe that not all crime, but a good chunk of it, the origin is poverty. And so if we extinguish poverty through my universal basic income plan that I have, we would be giving people the financial resources to survive. And if we'd be living in a just society where crime is disincentivized, there would be no need for as many police on the streets because, again, we'd be living in a safe and just society. And I will say this, as opposed to just looking for drops in the bucket from the police budget, there are literally trillions of more dollars that Wall Street, the big pharmaceutical companies, the fossil fuel industry, big real estate developers, big tech, private health insurance companies, let's take money from those people because they have a whole lot of it, and we can use that to fund every single New Yorker.
All right. Thanks.
Can I ask a clarifying?
Can I respond to that since he named me?
First of all, you go ahead, Tiffany. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So restorative justice, which is what Edwin mischaracterized but brought up in his answer, is one amongst many public safety strategies. We have to take a multi-strategy approach. And I want to point out to folks that it's voluntary. People on both sides of the aisle have to opt in. And again, my focus is always on the best public health and public safety outcomes. And what you'll find is, unfortunately, our criminal legal system gives us two choices: do nothing or a jail cell. But when you talk to survivors of crime, there's something actually that comes above punishment. They want to make sure that they are made whole and get to heal, that they're never hurt like that again, and that nobody else is hurt like they were. And so restorative justice programs provide the opportunity to engage in that process. And one quick stat I'll give you: Common Justice Restorative Justice Program, only for violent offenses, over 90% of the people, the survivors, opt in to this program. And then the program gets completed and the recidivism rates are almost none. Less than 5% of people recidivate. So again, this is about, I lean in to the strategies that are empirically proven to work and to keep people safe.
Can I respond to that as well?
Felicia, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think what's happening is we're seeing, something on paper, but it doesn't work out that way in reality. So let me give a very, I just have a simple question. If someone breaks into a senior living on my street's home, what happens under Ms. Caban's plan? Because I think that's, we're seeing that part of the plan is completely disbanding the police. We pay, city tax dollars to make sure that we have public safety. Under your future plan, who would we call? What would we do if someone breaks into our home, tries to attack, someone living? And this isn't just a hypothetical thing. This happens every single day. So what are we doing to address, criminal acts?
All right, I gotcha. Tiffany, I'll let
you
to
respond again.
Yeah,
I appreciate the opportunity to share more. I appreciate the opportunity to share more of
and then
the
we'll
platform.
move on to the next, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
No, this is great. This is great. First of all, nobody's disbanding the police tomorrow, right? Like, it took generations and generations and decades to build our machine of mass incarceration. And it's going to take a lot of work to divest from it. What we have to do, again, is create an infrastructure, a public health infrastructure that drastically prevents harm, right? So when somebody breaks into somebody's home, for example, looking at the root causes: was it driven by mental health issues? Was it driven by economic distress? Was it driven by substance use issues? Do we have the infrastructure in our neighborhoods to address that so that somebody doesn't go down that path? And then when we do, right, what are we doing to change behavior? And that's also at the core of restorative justice practices, but also at the core of accountability practices that don't rely solely on incarceration, because incarceration doesn't change behavior. In fact, studies show that incarceration increases criminal behavior. And so this is about making sure we are using the strategies that effectively make it so that this person is going to act the same way again.
May I have just 10 seconds?
No, listen.
I didn't refer to that.
Edwin, I'm sorry. We've got to move on to the next topic. And actually, Tiffany, you're the first one to answer this one. The selection of community boards. Do you think the process is a good one? And what would stop, like, a council member, appointing, 50 Tiffany Cabans, 50 Edwin DeJesus, or 50 Felicia Kalans? How do you make sure that a cross-section of the community is picked and it's not just a whole lot of people that go along with your own philosophy?
Yeah, I think that we need a commitment to making sure that there is a diverse cross-section of folks represented on the community board, and kind of going back and making sure that we're addressing historical inequities, because we can't ignore the fact that there are folks that have lacked representation on our community boards for a long time. So that's really, really, important. We have to make sure that we're creating more on-ramps to civic engagement and political empowerment, right? So doing the political education to kind of tap folks and say, hey, this space is for you. You can engage, you can make a difference. Because if we're not actively working to create that access, we do end up with those homogeneous bodies that don't reflect the diversity of our communities. When I was a public defender, right, I worked literally every single day with folks on the opposite side of the aisle, right, that were naturally adversarial, didn't agree with me on a lot of different things, defense attorney, prosecutor, but we had good working relationships. And it was rooted in communication and also me understanding that as much as I need to be rooted in my core beliefs, my values, I needed to understand where that other person was coming from and be open to the fact that there's still so much overlap and work that we can do together and really make sure that there's a robust exchange of ideas. So I think it's important to look at demographics, at politics, at values, and make sure that it really is truly representative.
Okay, terrific. Edwin, your thoughts on community board selections and making sure that, you know, you have a cross-section of the community?
Yeah,
both
absolutely.
Politically and ethnically, etc.
Yeah, I'll just use the first 10 seconds of my 90 to say I don't understand how you can virtue signal about decarceration while also making a peace agreement with Eric Adams, who is the architect of a militarized police state. Going to the community boards, look, we need to have more representation from people who have been living in Astoria their entire lives, such as myself. Whether you're from Richmond Hill like Tiffany Caban or Ohio like Felicia Kalan, that's totally fine. But we have to make sure that we put forward some sort of legislation so that people who've been living here for at least 5 years of residence in the district can be on that community board. That's how we democratize the process. That's how we get seniors involved, disabled community involved, veterans involved, but also young people like myself. You know, I'm at the border of millennial and Gen Z, but I shouldn't be making all the decisions. We should be going diversity in age group, diversity in ethnicities as well. And again, there should be some sort of rule set in place that you need to be living within the community for at least 5 years, which I believe I'm the only one up here who can say that.
Right, Edwin, thank you. Felicia, what's your response to that?
I'll respond and then give my answer. So just a little bit about my background. I actually was born in Indiana, so get it right. My husband was born in New York. He's a pastor, and we moved here to Queens. We've been coming to Queens for 9 years doing ministry work. It took us quite a time to save money to move here. And we helped start a few churches here in the community. He's no longer in full-time ministry. He actually does digital marketing. But I'm an Indiana girl, so get it right. But I came to Astoria as soon as I could. This is where my heart is. This is where I've raised my children. And as far as the community board is concerned, we need to make the process better for people to access people from all different backgrounds. I actually tried to get on the community board, funny enough, just a few years ago, and I was not able to do that. I don't think that who is on the community board should be determined by the city council person. I think that creates a very political appointment, and with a lot of the sensitive things that community boards are voting on, like zoning, there could be a lot of corruption in those appointments. So I think we should really look to civic organizations or different religious organizations, someone to write a letter of recommendation. But I think that we need to diversify the people that are on the community board. We have a great community board. There's really good people who've been invested in the community for a long time. We can always make that better.
Real quick, does anyone here know where Top Tomato was?
Listen, Edwin, I mean, hey, listen, it might be a legitimate question, but I don't think it's kind of where we're going here tonight.
It was on Dinmars Boulevard.
Okay. All right. Well, Edwin, the next question is for you. Now, what is your long-term view of Rikers Island? Obviously, it's in the news a lot lately, but in terms of what would you like to see on the island in, say, 5 to 10 years' time?
Yeah, so what we need to do with Rikers Island, which is a humanitarian crisis, is we need to expunge the records of all nonviolent drug offenders because they didn't harm anyone. And with the remaining population of those who did commit acts of violence, especially against women and children, these people need to be rehabilitated before we try reintegrating them back into society. And we can do that by transforming those remaining jails into rehabilitation centers with state-of-the-art medicine and expert professionals in the field of mental health therapy, so that we can actually go ahead and not take this jail and push it into this borough-based jail proposal that I believe my Democrat opponent has is flexible on, according to Keith Powers. What we need to do is we need to take that remainder of Rikers Island and use it to create an array of tidal energy generators that take energy from the East River and convert that into renewable energy in addition to wind and solar by putting that around the perimeter of Rikers Island. So like I said, it's not about necessarily opening or closing. We got to get the nonviolent drug offenders out, because again, marijuana, there's still people locked up for marijuana, even though it's legal, disproportionately African-American, Latino-American, and then with the remainder population, transform it into rehabilitation centers where we actually try to reintegrate them back into society. And we have to do that now, not by 2027, not by 2024, now.
All right, thanks, Edwin. Felicia, what's your response to that, the long-term future of Rikers Island?
Sure. So I would agree that the situation at Rikers Island is a humanitarian crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis for the inmates, for the correction officers. The city has not given the proper resources that's been needed for a really long time. I would support Councilman Holden's initiative to rebuild Rikers. I think it needs to be, resources need to be pumped in to make it better. But really what we're looking at is a group of politicians that want to close Rikers Island. They also don't want to build any more jails. So what are we going to do with the people who are there, who are violent offenders? Not only that, what about people who have sexually assaulted another person, or they're a trafficker, or there's so many different situations that we can bring up to talk about. If we're just giving house arrest to those people, what if the people that they're going back to are the victims? And so I think this is really the issue that we need to talk about. If we don't believe in, if the other side, my other opponents don't believe in pretrial detention, for example, what happens to the victims? You can't be for both sides. Either you're going to fight for the rights of victims, or you're going to fight for the rights of their, the people who harmed them. So we have to be practical about this. We're going to have a budget deficit. And we need to utilize what we have, and we need to make it more humane. We need to absolutely invest in rebuilding Rikers, making it a 21st century, place. But right now, the solutions that people have proposed, they're just not viable.
All right.
And not only are they not viable, they're going to create, an unsafe neighborhood.
All right. Okay. So, Tiffany, would you like to respond to this one?
Absolutely. So the positions I take, again, I just want to remind folks, always rooted in, is it going to forward public safety, public health, and where does the data lead us? Where does the empirical evidence lead us? I want to point out that Rikers Island is a jail. It's not a prison, right? And so what does that mean? If you are convicted of a violent offense, you are not sitting on Rikers Island. You are sentenced to upstate prison. These are the people that are on Rikers Island. The vast majority of people on Rikers Island are people who are just too poor to buy their constitutional right to the presumption of innocence. And if they had more money in their pocket, they would be out in their communities, and that has nothing to do with safety. The other part of the population on Rikers Island are people who are serving sentences for low-level offenses, short sentences. That is the result of criminalizing poverty, mental health, and substance use issues. These are public health issues that the city is responsible for creating public health solutions to: infrastructure, access to care, rather than throwing people in a jail cell and not addressing those issues, right? And then the third category is the technical supervision violations. You missed your supervision appointment, maybe you tested positive for marijuana. So I just want to name those things. So what we need to do is we need to close it. We also have other facilities, by the way, around the city. There's the Tombs next to the Manhattan Courthouse. There's in Brooklyn, but we need to make a renewable Rikers, because also this is the direct intersection of racial justice and climate justice. Racial justice and climate justice are one and the same, right? Because the folks who have been criminalized on Rikers Island go back to the same neighborhoods that have the worst public health outcomes, asthma rates, illegal dumping. Here we have Asthma Alley. We could build enough energy to get rid of battery energy, store enough energy to get rid of every single dirty, polluting peaker plant across our city with a renewable Rikers. And so I support the closing. I don't support the building of new jails. And I do support making that island into something that is generative after it has caused so much harm for so many years.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. Okay, the final question, I'm going to start with you, Felicia, and that is the 22nd Council District obviously has many needs. As a council member, obviously you get an allocation of discretionary funds. On what organisations and for what purpose would you spend those discretionary funds or allocate those city funds? On what?
So I think anyone that's been following me for a while knows that I'm very passionate about getting trash off of our streets. That's going to be a huge priority. Safe and clean streets, it plays into quality of life here in the district. There are great organizations that we can fund to get the trash off of our streets. It also helps supply jobs in the neighborhood. So that's going to be a huge priority for me. Also, replacing the trash bins. If you walk down, Ditmars Boulevard or Broadway or 30th Avenue, you're going to see a lot of trash. Some of that people have just tossed on the ground, but for the most part, it's flying out of the trash bins that don't have lids. These are old trash bins that need to be replaced. So really investing in the quality of life issues like sanitation, and then our kids. I'm a mom. I have a special place in my heart for children. They're the next generation. They're our future. And that will be a huge priority for me, is making sure we have after-school sports and activities, making sure we have enough funding to catch up our kids, anything to do with families and children. That is going to be a priority for me. So, there's a lot of different things we could do. I think every child should have the same opportunities afforded to a child growing up anywhere else in New York. And we especially need to invest in our children here in Queens.
All right. Tiffany, the question is now for you. Discretionary funds, what would be a priority for you, such as organizations and needs, etc.?
So my priority is deference to our neighbors, right? Like making sure that we are engaging in a robust participatory budgeting process so that people actively get to decide how our dollars are spent. And in my intro earlier this evening, I talked about the work that we're already doing. And in addition to some of the things I named, what we're already doing is compiling the information to figure out what are the projects that our community cares about prioritizing. We have been doing deep canvassing across the district. So that's when a volunteer or myself goes out, talks to a neighbor for anywhere from 15 to 20, 25 minutes about an issue area. We've been doing that on public safety. We've been doing that on the environment. We've been hosting these town halls where we put together wish lists, and we are keeping a running list of like, what are the things that are missing in our community? What do we really want? And so I'm going to continue in that process of listening and sort of compiling what the priorities are going to be. But, I can tell you right off the bat, the things that I hear a lot about are improving our green spaces, updating our schools, expanding our composting, taking care of sanitation. People talk about wanting more trees, but I just recently learned that it costs like $15,000 to plant one tree, which blows my mind. But those are the things that our neighbors care about. So my commitment is to really make sure that we are democratizing the way that we spend money in our district, and that our neighbors have a say in how our money is spent, so that the community starts to reflect their desires, their wishes, their ambitions.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Edwin?
I would use that discretionary funding to fund several groups. First of all, labor. If you're somebody who lost out on wages because you're on strike, you should be financially compensated for it. If you lost your job due to a mandate and lost your health care as a result, you should be compensated for it. We should also be funding an unprecedented system of rain gardens across our city to mitigate any further damage from another remnants of something like Hurricane Ida once again. I also believe, and this is very important to me, in composting. And we should be funding organizations on the ground, like Astoria Pug, for example, who are out there doing the work every single day to make sure that we are saving our environment. And I'll just end by saying this. The Green New Deal was not written by the Democratic Party. It was written by the Green Party in 2006, and it was co-opted, watered down, and made corporate friendly, and gave tax abatements to companies like ExxonMobil. That is the plan that the Democrats support. I do not support that plan. I actually support in creating double the amount of green jobs in the union with union wages in the realm of green technology and green infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Edwin. I have to ask one more question. I'm sorry. It was something that I should have asked early on in the discussion. And I'm going to ask you first, Tiffany, if you don't mind. Homelessness is a big problem. It's a big problem everywhere. What would you do to combat it in the New York City Council?
Yeah, I mean, one, we have to create ultra affordable housing. We have a housing crisis, and it's not enough to say that we're building housing, because unfortunately, too much of what's being built is unaffordable, and it needs to be deeply ultra affordable. But we have to take a holistic approach to homelessness. So understanding all of the things that affect that. So for example, increasing worker protections, because if you lose your job, you then can become housing insecure. Making sure that we have healthcare guarantees, because so many folks are one medical bill away from financial, destruction. We know that folks experiencing homelessness, for example, there's a swath of the population that struggles with mental health issues, and that contributes to the struggle to maintain, stable housing. So looking at all of these different issues and addressing them at the root, right? We have to invest in housing. We have to have a budget, right? That over $90 billion budget is one that really addresses those issues. We have to divest from the bloated police budget so that we can invest in the infrastructure that's going to house people, that's going to give them access to stability, right? Housing is healthcare stability, a job is stability, education is stability, food access is stability, all of those different things.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. Edwin?
Yep. There's no reason that in the richest city in the richest country in the world that every single person shouldn't be guaranteed housing. Housing is healthcare, and I believe that healthcare is a human right. And neither of the two major parties, Democrat nor Republican, believe on their major platforms that healthcare is a human right. I led the New York City March for Medicare for All with Susan Sarandon. And I'll say this, the best way that we can combat the housing crisis and homelessness crisis is through our public housing system and NYCHA. We need to fully fund NYCHA. Right now, it is at threat of privatization by the mayor's blueprint plan, which would eliminate Section 9 and convert the Section 8 vouchers through RAD and PAC conversions to be privatized. And so I want to make sure that somebody who claims to be progressive would vote no on this blueprint plan. And I think it's very important that I'm the only one who has actually publicly came out and said, I would say no to this blueprint plan. And likewise, a big section of the homelessness population suffers from substance abuse. I think we should be following the research at medical organizations like NYU that have been doing the case studies on psilocybin, which have been known to nearly cure or fully cure depression, substance abuse, PTSD, trauma, suicidal thoughts. This is an alternative form of medicine that we can be using to help people who are desperately in need. And again, we are in a mental health crisis right now where 1 in 10 Americans have seriously contemplated suicide. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of housing and healthcare.
All right. And Felicia?
Yeah, so I'm just going to talk figures here. In 2020, we spent about $3.5 billion on homelessness. That amounts to about $58,000 per person. We have about 60 to 80,000 homeless individuals. That has doubled during the de Blasio administration. If there has been a huge, detrimental thing that the de Blasio has done, it's been in the realm of homelessness. There's so much corruption. This goes to show one-party rule is not good for anyone. We need a balance. We need accountability. Thrive NYC pocketed millions of dollars, and we have to bring accountability and make sure that our most vulnerable individuals are well taken care of. We have to deconstruct the way that we address homelessness. There are people who've fallen on hard times, and yes, they need to get access to housing. Everyone needs to get access to housing as quickly as possible. And then there's 25% of the homeless population which have a severe mental illness. And then, like Edwin was saying, there are people who struggle with substance abuse. And that's an issue that hits very close to home for me, because that was my own father. It's why I was raised by a single mother and didn't have a father in my life. So when we talk about legalizing, drugs, and when we talk about all of these things, I am the daughter of someone who had an addiction, and these issues hit very close to home for me. So like I said, we need to address the homelessness crisis with humane proposals. We need to bring accountability, and there's no reason why the amount of money we're spending, we can't house the homeless. I'm not for the failed shelter model. I'm not for the project coming in at East Elmhurst. I think we should be investing in long-term housing and not investing in failed sheltered models.
All right. Well, thanks, Felicia. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. Felicia, Tiffany, Edwin, appreciate it very much. No, it's a pretty long road to the election. As the early election, of course, early voting starts on Saturday. The general election is November 2nd. I'd like to wish all of you the best in the election and in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So we're going to be, writing a story on this. It'll be going up tomorrow, and we'll also be providing, the video copy of YouTube on this. So again, I want to wish you well, and thanks again. And on behalf of the Queen's Post, we very much appreciate it. Okay. All right. Thanks.